Chuck Olenek. I'm a reenactor. And for 36 years in the classroom, I used historical reenactment to lure my students into liking history. And to do that, I would wear the garb for the time period, and I would play the music in the background that would be appropriate for the time period and culture we were studying. So they got a soundtrack to history. And everyone likes soundtracks. And I'd immerse them in the art and any aspects of the culture that could jam into my hour-long class. And, well, I'm not in the classroom anymore. So I needed to find things to do. So what I've decided is I am on a mission Odyssey, which is very pretentious. And that will allow me to use that room full of garb that I have at the house, as well as my passion for bringing the past to life, which is also why I'm involved in historical reenactment. My desire to preserve landmarks, since landmarks go away. Sometimes natural disasters happen, sometimes people end up erasing them. And I like to play history detective and connect the dots. Well, this mission Odyssey has taken me north of San Francisco Bay because I found 2 Asistencias that exist, or existed, but there's so little documentation about them. So I intend to visit the sites. So what I'm doing right now is I am on my way to what was the Asistencia Santa Eulalia. And I hope you stick with me on my journey. I'm standing at the site of what was the Asistencia Santa Eulalia. But in order to get a feel for what went on here, you have to go back to the native Californians that were living here. And the earliest records of the site, which were out of Mission Dolores. In 1804, a party from the mission crossed over the Strait of Carquines into the East Bay area, and they ended up going to a rancheria called Suisun, and they never returned. And their deaths were recorded over in the records at Mission Dolores. Later, other expeditions went, and any Christianized neophytes that were showing up, attempting to spread the gospel, or they were traveling out on a paseo, they were chased out. They were forbidden entry. And it wouldn't be until 1810 when military action took place. There was an idea in 1807 to construct Thule reed boats and bring an expedition into the land of the Suisun, but there were too many distractions. There was too much going on, so that idea was abandoned. But on May 22nd, 1810, Lieutenant Gabriel Moraga led an expedition of 17 soldados de guerra and an unknown number of Christian neophyte auxiliaries against a force of 120 Suisun. And in the battle that followed, a number of the Suisun were killed, and 2 Spanish corporals were wounded, and 2 soldados were wounded. And those were the only injuries to the Spanish. Well, as the battle progressed, some of the Suisun ended up taking refuge in 3 of their Thule reed homes or houses, and those ended up being destroyed by fire, and a lot of the Suisun would not come out. They refused to surrender. However, records do record that 6 boys and 6 girls were taken back to be baptized. The Suisun were moved pretty much en masse to Mission San Jose and Mission Dolores. And one of those that was moved there was a young boy named Sina, who later would be known by the name of Chief Solano. A rancho ends up getting established here in the site of the former rancheria, and there's a building built for the major domo and for an Indian alcalde and to help run the place and his family. But it's not going to be until after Mission San Francisco Solano gets established that Padre Altamira, who helped to establish that mission, decides an Asistencia would fit well here. And that Asistencia was Santa Eulalia. During those years from 1824 to 1832, the Christianized Indians living in wattle houses between the adjacent hills and the present-day Suisun Valley Road area grew crops around the site. Today there's mention of the introduction of almonds in California by the Padres. Bitter almonds, seedlings several generations removed from the original plants, are to be found in the area of Rockville and Nelson's here, near an olla or a stone basin. They also ran livestock, and there was a horse corral that was run by the alcalde and his family. An adobe house was built for the use of visiting Padres, ministering to the Patwin neophytes, and working to convert non-Christians from the Hill Patwin and Valley Patwin tribes to the north. Now, when secularization hit, the Indian neophytes were to receive land of not more than 400 varas, not less than 100 varas, and a vara was basically like 3 feet. And these were to go to the neophyte heads of households. And Sina, baptized as Francisco Solano, known as Chief Solano, one of the 6 alcaldes in the new pueblo of Sonoma, received his share. The Suisun, named Sina, was baptized at Mission Dolores and given the name Francisco Solano in 1810. He was among the Indians that was sent to the Mission San Francisco Solano at Sonoma in 1824, about the age of 25. Solano had developed a close friendship and alliance with General Mariano Vallejo, using his forces like sepoys to supplement Vallejo's soldados. According to Vallejo and other Mexican citizens of the time, Solano's Indian forces helped him defeat a combination of Sacramento Valley tribes under the leader Zampai. When Vallejo was granted the 66,000-acre lands of Petaluma, he made sure to reward his ally Solano with the 17,000-acre Rancho Suisun, which included the original homelands of Solano and the Asistencia Santa Eulalia, for his service to the general. Apparently, Solano moved back to his original home at the Asistencia for the next few years, although he remained in contact with General Vallejo. Vallejo's son made the bas-reliefs depicting Solano and his wife. Vallejo had purchased the lands back from Solano. After Solano passed from pneumonia in 1850, Vallejo urged the state legislature to name one of the original 27 counties for his friend. In a series of property transactions from 1877 to 1880, Peter and Giovanni Canavacini acquired the Santa Eulalia mission property. Apparently, the brothers constructed a wooden building on top of the original stone building. Inside the smaller of the 2 rooms, there's an unusual sink that's sculptured from the wall stonework with a hole that drained the contents onto the floor, identified as a sacrarium. A sacrarium is a special basin that is connected by a pipe directly to the ground. Sacrariums are found inside Roman Catholic church buildings by the altar in the church. The purpose of the sacrarium was to dispose of water used sacramentally and particles of the consecrated Eucharist by returning these particles directly to the earth from which it came. The other, much larger room was most likely the main room where services were held. So far, that's 21 missions out of the way, 10 Asistencias, and I'm on my way to the next one. Here it comes, the most northerly site and the last site built for the chain of missions and the Asistencias. This was once the site of a Native American rancheria located at the confluence of the Choco-Alami Creek, known as Santa Rosa Creek now, and Brush Creek. There was a rock formation called Flat Rocks that the Pomo used to take full advantage of for fishing, bathing, meeting a lot of their needs. And it was at this site that the Spanish, or the Mexicans actually, are going to build the last remnant of the mission trail. And this would be the Asistencia Santa Rosa de Lima. When the Russians established Fort Ross and Port Rumyantsev, or Bodega Bay, north of San Francisco Bay, this was making the Spanish very uncomfortable. Now, Gabriel Moraga had been sent forth to investigate what was going on, but he was also north of the bay looking for possible mission sites. And Mission San Rafael was established as a hospice for sick neophytes to recover. There was an attempt by the Spanish to establish a mission in the Santa Rosa area in 1823, but that failed. And maybe that's because the Spanish were already dealing with establishing Mission Francisco Solano, and then there was the Asistencia that was that Santa Eulalia over in Fairfield. So maybe there was too much going on, and the mission era was pretty much starting to wind down. But in 1828, Padre Juan Amoros from Mission San Rafael came to this area. In this spot, he was celebrating the Mass of Santa Rosa de Lima, and he noticed a curious group of Pomo watching, and one girl approached, and the story goes she asked to be baptized, which probably meant that the Padre was luring her over, come here, this is good for you. Whatever the motives were, whatever happened, she was baptized. Rosa, and the area around here, Padre Amoros declared as the creek and the land and the site of the future Asistencia would be Santa Rosa de Lima. In 1832, General Mariano Vallejo, shortly before secularization begins, he comes up to the area and he says, there's only two buildings. One's a chapel, one's a quarter for Padres. Padres not living there full time. And he noticed that there was a herd of swine being taken care of here and being raised. And later on, what would end up happening is Padres would come up both from Mission San Rafael and Mission San Francisco Solano to conduct Mass for the members of General Vallejo's relatives who were moving into the area. In 1836, Doña Maria Ignacia Lopez y Carrillo dealt with the passing of her husband. With him, she had 13 children, 12 of whom survived to adulthood. But with the passing of her husband, Joaquin, she loaded up her possessions and her 9 unmarried children, and she moved north from San Diego. And she came to this area, and it wasn't a capricious thing. She also happened to be the mother-in-law of General Mariano Vallejo, and she was given permission to settle here by the general, which meant that this must have been some of the land that he had grabbed during secularization. And she ended up building the first home in Santa Rosa. She did it apparently on the foundations of the Asistencia, and maybe incorporating one of the 2 buildings, or maybe both of them. And there's no real records of this, but people know the Asistencia existed. As a matter of fact, the records, oddly enough, happen to have been destroyed, and maybe that was to kind of hide where, the land came from. So in 1841, she's granted formal title, or it's reconfirmed by an acting governor pro tem, and this makes her one of the first rancheras, or one of the few rancheras in Alta California. And she's planting crops, and she's working the land, and she's also got her help from former neophytes. But she establishes like a almost 9,000 acre rancho. Okay. 1846, the Mexican War takes place, so things get a little uncomfortable, and she had some relatives who were incarcerated briefly by the Americans. And once the treaty is signed in 1847 saying California's out of the fight, okay, things are settling down. And a year after the Mexican War ended, when California had become part of the United States, or at least become part of United States territory in 1849, Doña Ignacia passed. So far in my mission Odyssey, I have documented 21 missions, the traditional 21 that you usually find in books, 11 Asistencias. Most of those were hidden, and most of them look like this or are just plaques. A couple of estancias, 5 presidios. Well, that should be the end of my mission Odyssey, except I plan to do other films, but there's another couple of sites that I need to visit, and they are missions that most Californians don't read about or know about. They're over by Yuma, on the California side of the border. So I hope you stick with me on my journey.